Speaker is Mel. Mel is a director, creative director, motion designer based in Sydney. The many moons of her career have seen her work with broadcasters, post-production companies, animation studios, agencies and production companies, collaborating on works for TVCs, TV series, branded content and music videos. She's kind enough to join us from Sydney. Please get your hands out and bang them together for Mel Pragassen.
Morning, everyone. This is nice, isn't it? Like, sort of butterflies have exploded in my belly, kind of nice. It's good. Thank you, James and Kim, for inviting me here today. It's awesome that there is a festival like this for motion graphics. Yes, and as James mentioned, I'm a director, creative director and motion designer. And today I'm here to share with you the most important part of my practice, which is keeping good company and collaborating. While there are dozens of benefits that come from collaborating on a project, there are 4 key reasons why I feel it is important as a creative process for individuals and for the industry. Why do we collaborate? Most people will say because they have to. Maybe you are early in your careers and you're thrown into a team with little or no choice, or you're missing a skill set and you have to get someone on to do that. Ideally, you would do it because you want to. That way, and because you want to bring more to the project and get more out of yourself. But before I go on about that point, I want to give you a little insight on my journey, which may explain why I work the way I do. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Our story begins here. Well, it was actually a lot earlier than this, but I'll spare you the pain. The University of Wollongong, where Mel met someone you might recognise. After 3 years, she graduated with a BA in graphic design and new media. Armed with design fundamentals, a whole lot of enthusiasm, but zero experience, she attempted to enter the workforce. Mel loved print, so she interned at Yen magazine for 3 days a week for a while, before she decided it was time to get some money. Luckily, Erin called. She needed a hand cutting out AFL players' heads. This is not a lie. They deep-etched hundreds of them. Sadly, it was at a time when peroxide blonde spiky hair was in for gentlemen. Through this pain is how Mel became a freelance junior motion designer at Z-Space. It introduced her to the world of design for broadcast. She collaborated with 3D artists, creative directors and other designers, jumping on whatever project she could. Mel freelanced there for about 2 years before she searched for a more permanent position so that she could finally quit her hospitality job. Tina Bull, one of the CDs at Z-Space, pointed her towards the Foxtel Design Studio. There Mel was given a chance to build her technical skills. The structure was different there. Although she was surrounded by immensely talented people, Mel tended to work solo on projects and turn them around fast. About a year went by, and Mel grew into a decisive, technically capable designer. Then, she saw this. Mel had absolutely nothing to do with this clip, but found it mesmerising all the same, and wanted to work for whoever made it. Turns out, one of her old senior designers, Duncan Irving, designed the characters for his friend Brendan Cook, who coincidentally was looking for a midweight designer. Mel interviewed and got the job. Brendan pulled her focus back to the conceptual process, referencing art books instead of internet blogs. The next couple of years, Mel collaborated on promos, channel brandings, music videos and short films, all with an emphasis on creative. The industry began to change. Animation studios and post houses were doing more live action productions. To make sure she did it well, Mel wanted to spend a little more time on set. After a beer or 5 with again Tina Bull, Tina asked Mel to come over and join her at production company Luscious International that were representing her as a director. Being a designer herself, Tina's commercials were often highly stylised and conceptual, so she needed the designer's eye across her treatments. Mel became a director's assistant. She worked first-hand with some of Australia's best directors on big brand commercials. She researched and built treatments, developed concepts, art directed, built sets, worked as a video split operator, and branded short films. She really liked it. A few years and dozens of productions later, Mel moved to the company formerly known as Jungle Boys. At the time, they were a smaller production company. Their directors were younger and had a focus on comedy. But they also did corporates, which acted as bread and butter to help feed the comedy stuff. Corporates turned into content. The comedy spots also became content, and to make sense of the different streams they were now producing for, the company was subdivided into 3 branches: Jungle, long-form, Jungle TVCs, and their creative content arm. This is when In the Thicket was born. Mel became creative director, and alongside the EP and producer, they spent the next 4.5 years producing a lot of work, building client and supplier relationships and growing the company. Those years were both challenging and exciting. After 3 years of hard work and success there, Mel took a month. Yep, like many others her age, she did yoga and believed yoga could save the world, but all it did was really make her more limber, and she regrouped and freelanced for about a year. Before another opportunity came about. Which brings us to now. Is that right, Mel?
Yeah.
We're now?
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, alright, over to you, Mel.
Thanks. That voice was the voice of Ben, who's I don't know if you are attuned to voices. He's also the voice of Mitsubishi and Barbecues Galore. So lucky me. The opportunity Ben kindly mentions there is this one. Earlier this year, I became partners in a content production and post studio based in Sydney. It's not something I set out to do, but after spending a little time with Ben, the voice of God, and Dan, it felt right because we were very much aligned with our values and have decided to build a business model around the idea of breaking down the walls of competition and just collaborating more with other companies and other studios instead of trying to hold everything ourselves. But back to that intro video, how good is scaling up standard def to HD? Yeah. Awesome. That video was not just to chew up 5 minutes of talk time, but rather to visually explain my first key point. Collaborating, even on a small scale, contributes to your longevity. Because no matter how minuscule you think your role is, it matters to someone somewhere and may lead you on a path to something ace. This is my chaotic career tree. It probably should have, it actually splinters off a lot more than that, but for the sake of simple infographic, it works. And the chances are I probably wouldn't be standing here right now or even still working in the industry had I not been surrounded by some awesome, inspiring people that pushed me along the way and shared their experiences with me. I think I've probably burnt out about twice in that whole arena, but kept getting lured back in. It's very easy to be passive in collaborative situations and just go through the motions to get the job done, but you won't be stimulated by that, and nor are the people you're working with. If you apply yourself a little more consciously and contribute to the end game, the rewards are great, and they may not eventuate immediately, but they do come up at the right times. The next benefit I want to discuss is that of solutions. Because two heads are better than one, taken from an old English proverb from the 1500s and is still very relevant today. It means two people have the ability to solve a problem that one alone may not be able to. And this rang very, very true in a project I did whilst I was out in the thicket a few years ago. Unique insights come from unexpected collaborations. See what I'm doing there? It's about a collaboration within a collaboration within a collaboration. I'm going to blow your minds, man. The brief came to us from a creative agency called The Monkeys. The University of Sydney is about to launch their new Charles Perkins Centre, which is dedicated to finding real solutions to lifestyle-related diseases. The unique aspect of the centre is their research model where they encourage collaborations between different disciplines that wouldn't normally interact on a university setting, for example, architects and obesity experts. The building itself is designed to facilitate these collaborations. We were asked to create 3 30-second stop-motion animations. They needed to be simple, playful and considered. Our audience were the informed public, so people with smarts, The launch date was July 4, which meant from the point of approval we would have 6 weeks to get it all done. They provided us with 3 voiceover scripts, but no visuals. And these were probably the best scripts I had read in over a year. The first describes a project between a diabetes expert working with a programmer, the second, microbiologist and astrophysicist, and the third describes innovations between agriculturalists and robotics experts. I knew I wanted to do this project because, like I said, these good scripts and good concepts don't come around heaps. But the timeline made it seem impossible. The only way we were going to be able to achieve it was to collaborate on the project. Luckily for me, I got to work with Maricor and Marika, who, I don't know if you're familiar with their work. They're 2 wonderfully conceptual art directing twin sisters. They illustrate, embroider, and have a beautiful knack for craft. The reality is, given a different timeline, either of us could have managed a project on our own, but together we considered the budgets, timelines, and stress levels, and none of these were going to be great, but what we could produce at the end could be awesome. We had 3 days to get a competitive pitch together, and after discussing our direction that we wanted to go in, we had to divide to conquer. So Marika took on storyboarding the very first script, while I focused on writing the overall approach and direction. I am going to quickly flick through the treatment. There's going to be a lot of text up on screen, but you don't have to read it. I'll give you the gist. Our approach was to use everyday objects in unexpected ways. We would build a series of assemblages and animate them using a combination of stop motion, post-production compositing, and live action. We touched on the use of typography, sound design, and tone. Then we looked at our very first script. The nature of diabetes is balancing sugar levels with insulin, so the overall theme of this particular script was balance. We wanted to create surreal still life scenes that seemed to defy gravity. It would also feature some elements that would move really playfully like an 8-bit arcade game, and just so we could reference the aspect of programming. You might not be able to tell in these storyboards, but the scenes are actually made up of fresh fruit, candy, and laboratory equipment. We quickly touched on the second concept, integrating the idea of maths and patterning to play into the microbiologist script. And then we offered a quick reference to the third script to do with robotics and agriculturalism. We sent it off, and a couple of days later, success! We were very weary, having not slept in a few days, but celebrated nonetheless. And then those celebratory feelings slowly fade when your producer does their producer thing and gives you a schedule. And you remember that you agreed to lose your weekends for the next month. The schedule that you're looking at, it details everything from storyboarding, model making, experiments, props buying, test shoots, agency meetings, client meetings, pre-production meetings, post-production, and somewhere in the middle of that, we've actually got to sleep. We spent the next week doing storyboards. Again, we had to divide to conquer. I took on the microbiologist script while the twins took on the other 2. I'm only going to take you through the production of 2 of them because I personally really want to hear what Mike has to say a little later. I don't want to chew into that. Right away, we bring in our DOP, which is super important at the early stages of a production because no one understands light, shade, and space like they do. Their input will influence your storyboards as well. We also brought in previs artists as everything needed to be built in 3D first, so we knew precisely what lens we were using and how many frames each action would take. This is the animatic for what was later retitled Sweet Fighter.
Diabetes experts, endocrinologists to their friends, got chatting to gaming programmers and created an app that helps people keep their blood sugar levels balanced, potentially improving millions of lives. Unique insights come from unexpected collaborations at the University of Sydney's Charles Perkins Centre.
And this is for the universal similarities one.
A biologist and an astrophysicist got talking and found the equations used to crunch the numbers of the cosmos could also make sense of the astronomical number of signals between human cells, paving the way for disease prediction and prevention. Unique insights come from unexpected collaborations at the University of Sydney's Charles Perkins Centre.
It took a lot to get to even that stage, back and forth with the agency and the client. In particular, that script was super confusing because at the end of the day, you don't have a product or anything that you're talking about. They're talking about the idea of maths from astrophysics and maths from microbiology having a similarity. So it was a challenge to get that one to work, but came well in the end. These shots are from our test shoot, which was only 4 days before the actual shoot days. And there were still so many problems to solve. The amazing molecule that you can see in the top left corner, or as I like to call it, the fruit kebabi. It needs to rotate in one direction while the ring around it rotates in the opposite direction. And then there's also the issue of we were using fresh fruit and juice falling on a cardboard set while you're doing stop motion is not ideal. The second image on the top right, the balance scene, that one is, I don't know if you can see, it's like at the moment being rigged up by wooden kitchen skewers, and that's not stable enough when you're on set and people are moving around. Then there was also the issue of our Cosmos scene. We had to basically animate those buttons and change the colour of the card underneath it at the same time. So still so much to do and only 4 days to get it done. But we expanded our team at that stage to include our small but integral on-set crew. And these are stills from day 2 of the production, where day 1 we had shot the robotics script. And so we're all pretty exhausted by this stage. In the production, everything is hand animated. We shot on a 5D and captured using Dragon stop motion. Day 2 went over by about 2 or 3 hours, and in a perfect world, you don't want to be shooting more than 10 seconds of stop motion a day, and here we were trying to do 30 seconds. So by day 3, we are extra tired. And I don't know if you can see the expression on my face down in the bottom left. That's the look when you go, oh, sugar, we've just lost the mark and have to go back and reanimate the last 30 frames. And then our most complicated setup. We had to rig a piece of clear plastic elevated above the coloured card so that we could light the sculpture from underneath and change the coloured card while we were also animating the very delicate sculpture. Then we uncovered the perspex, and you can see in the top right, you see the camera very clearly. So we had to black out the entire studio. You have moments where you look at your setup and you go, why the fudge are we doing this? And then you see it through the lens and you cry a little bit because it worked and you're really tired. And then we bring on our post team. Charlie Wheeler took care of the offline edit. Then myself, Maricor, and the amazing Sam Ho go through the process of rig removal and compositing plates together to provide you the final product. This one is Sweet Fighter.
Diabetes experts, known to their friends as endocrinologists, have been chatting to gaming programmers, and it's already producing results. Together, they've created an amazing app that helps people with diabetes keep their blood sugar levels balanced. An innovation with the potential to improve millions of lives. Unique insights come from unexpected collaborations. At the Charles Perkins Centre, the University of Sydney.
And universal similarities.
Right now, a biologist is busy working with an astrophysicist. They recently got talking and found that the equations used to crunch the numbers of the cosmos could also make sense of the astronomical number of signals sent between human cells. Information that could one day help us predict and prevent disease. Unique insights come from unexpected collaborations. At the Charles Perkins Centre, the University of Sydney.
I know you look at that and you forget all the hard times and you just go, oh, pretty. The next point I want to discuss is friction. Hey. Sounds negative, but it doesn't have to be. Technically, friction is when two opposing forces act to stop motion. The energy that is lost to friction is converted into light, heat, or sound. So, from creative differences come new ideas. And boy, did we have a lot of new ideas in this one. Soulmates, if any of you are familiar with that series, it was created by the creators of Bondi Hipsters for ABC2. The brief. Create a 30-second split screen opening title sequence. Christian and Nick will each make up one half of a whole through the use of split screens. It needs to find a balance between the soul element and the mates element of the show. One which is somewhat worthy and the other is fun, playful and fucking cheeky. It also should convey the larger concept of past lives. These two characters are two parts of the same whole. They keep being reattached lifetime after lifetime. We needed to hero the 8 main characters, as well as 2 neutral characters, which were basically empty vessels between rebirths. And the titles should be in the style of a music video. We would be provided with a soundtrack and lyrics. The brief came directly to me from the series producer and creators, who I had already had a good working relationship with. Budget wasn't great, it was going to be a complete love job. But if I get to spew psychedelic colours on a screen, I'm pretty okay with that. A friend of mine had been wanting to collaborate on a project, so I thought if he was willing to make the budget work, then this could be the one. So I brought on Ant McPhail. We had worked together previously at Luscious. He had an edit background which worked well for me. It meant I could focus on the design, branding and final compositing, and he could manage the offline. I began the design of the TV series branding. I wanted a style that was futuristic, techie, but retro at the same time. This is a final lockup that we ended up with. I researched ethereal cosmic images for backgrounds and from these developed the colour palette and then made up a few patterns because I wanted to loosely reflect how the characters keep coming together and repeating the same behaviours. Meanwhile, Ant was researching and sourcing what I thought would be those cosmic textures for the backgrounds, but instead he gathered a whole load of stock vector icons and flourishes, which really didn't go with the concept. We went back and forth for a while and I was beginning to doubt whether we could actually work creatively or not. And then I swear he must have fallen into a massive black hole and found the end of the internet because he produced all of these videos. And there were dozens and dozens of them, all royalty-free films, some of them from government videos in the 60s where they were studying children and their first relationships. Science films on bacteria, which bacteria is the friendliest organism in the universe. And old films about a first mate on a ship. So all of these related back to the idea of friendship in a really obscure way, which just gave a whole new layer of meaning to the titles. All put together, the final sequence looks like this.
We've lived 1,000 lives together, and we'll be best friends forever, in a mostly platonic sense. This is a love that never ends, never ends, never ends. This is a love that never ends.
I love that. That music track gets me every time. It's great. The final benefit I want to discuss is probably the most important. Self-awareness. Knowing what you bring to the table. Collaborating challenges you to articulate and refine exactly what you're great at and what you're not so great at. Questions are asked of you and the repercussions are fairly immediate, so you're generally forced to be completely honest. With this next project, which is pretty much my latest piece of work, I don't think I've ever felt as comfortable in my own skin as I did during the production of this one. The brief came to Looper from an agency we had done a fair bit of work with this year, but all of it had been live action. we were asked to create a 30-second TVC for the HSBC Sydney Sevens, which is a rugby union festival held on the Australia Day long weekend next year. The treatment was to be music video in style with 2D animated graphics and urban dances. The music composition needed to be contemporary and upbeat with a catchy hook. The rationale, be transformed. It's your time to go get colourful, have fun, and get your game on. It needs to promote costuming and fancy dress. It needed to include rugby talent and also had to include archival footage from past rugby sevens matches, all in a neat little 30 seconds. They also provided us with a mood reel. And as you can see here, they're pretty set with their look and feel, but they had no script, no narrative, and I had 2 days to pull together a competitive pitch. Even as they were giving us the brief, in my head I was already pulling together the team that I wanted on it, and I knew that we could just smash it out of the park. Then Eric, the ECD of the agency Digilante, turned to me and said, so how are you going to do this? And I went through and kind of said, well, we do a production first, or we do all our pre-production design in pre, and then we'll shoot and then go to the animating. And he went, no, how are you going to do this? And I was super confused, but fumbled through my answer and said, well, I guess technically it's kind of simple, but the techniques are really time consuming. And so I'll probably use a variety of different techniques. And I don't know if he was entirely satisfied, and I know I wasn't satisfied with that answer. When it comes to talking about how I'm going to do stuff, I don't know if you're the same, but After Effects and the Adobe suite is like an extension of my arm. Been using it for years and I just do it. So being asked how exactly am I going to achieve it, I found that difficult. My conversations are usually about what will I achieve, and that I can tell you. But in hindsight, he just wanted to know what I brought to the table. So I put it all in the treatment. Again, I'm going to talk through this quickly, and there will be a lot of text on screen. So, in the approach, I reversed the brief to show my understanding of their needs. I discuss my concept, which is the extraordinary universe. I wanted a visual device that separated the real world from this transformative space of self-expression and playfulness. It also worked as a way I could justify the talent being in a white cyc, which worked a whole lot better for the animation. Music. My reference styles were Afro beats, still one of my favourites. Electro dance with Latino flavour. And then straight up funk.
Wow! Come on! Feel right in this mother. Feel good in this mother.
And then I go on to touch on a little bit of filming techniques. We wanted to use different frame rates to allow for speed ramping in post, and wanted to use a handheld rig so that the camera could move with the dancers and create a lot more energy. Illustrations were going to be loose, bubbly, vibrant, and self-expressive. They would feature iconic Sydney locations, keywords, and fancy dress. We were also going to have animated features zipping across frames, splattering, exploding, and all to enhance the dancer's actions. And we would achieve all of this using a combination of cell animation, particle effects, and potentially stop motion. It was really hard to do style frames, and that's usually what I would do in a pitch, but when you've got no narrative, you don't know what you're depicting. So I wrote the narrative instead. I'll just give you a gist of it. We open on a local field or a front yard. Our hero crosses frame towards a rugby ball that's on the ground. The ball comes to life and transports the hero to the extraordinary universe. And here it's a pumping party. There he's dancing. We have all the costuming, animating on. And the ball itself is a character of its own. It's the physical device that leads us from player to dancer to player to dancer, etc. The edit becomes faster, builds to a climax where we're able to slip in the archival vision, and we finish as the hero launches the ball towards camera. Animated features transition us back to the real world where they are completely awestruck. Gave a couple visual references, but I didn't go too far into detail. And then I talk about movement and dance and reference the performers that I wanted to use. 2 a.m, I finished that initial treatment, sent it to Dan, my producer, and then I flew away to Fiji, turned my phone off for 4 days and didn't want to know. But I guess by now you're getting the pattern. We won it. I wouldn't be showing it if I didn't. So I'll get straight to the point. With larger projects and more collaborators involved, communication is key. There are people on this list that I have, like, even to this day, have never had a direct conversation with. So it's my trick is to keep evolving the initial treatment, and every time we agree on something, build that booklet back up, and so that there is one guide for everyone to understand the big picture. There is no point giving someone half the information. If they don't know the big picture, they can't bring something to it. The first people I brought on were the fudging awesome Sam Ho. She's a designer and animator in Sydney. Campbell Brown, my DOP. Josh Wormont, the composer. And Vanessa Marion, who was the agent for the dancers. We all got started. Sam and I produced the storyboards. I worked with the agency creatives to refine the narrative. We went back and forth a few times, but ended up in a really good place. Not too far away from where the original narrative began. Except now I think we only see the rugby players right at the very end. Then Sam and I produced style frames because it was important to lock off exactly what illustrations we were going to have so that we could shoot precisely to have the right space. And then we did some animation, roto, and tracking tests. I pull lighting references to give Campbell a guide to the hyper-real look I had in mind. And I worked with Vanessa on casting our dancers. Then we take a visit to our locations. The very first location, our little local field in the top left, is where our little hurdle comes in. I say little. Campbell, the DOP, who's the most chilled out surfer dude in the universe, says it's like catastrophic. Our location had been booked and paid for before we had a chance to see it. It turns out two sides of the park were massive construction sites, and I'm saying like multi-story construction sites. So we had one direction to shoot in, which causes a whole load of lighting issues. And the fact that I wanted to do a 180-degree wraparound shot didn't help either. So this next clip I will show you, I'll probably just talk through it. The first is the storyboard animatic. The second is a test shoot that Campbell and I had to try to find the solution with. And this is how we actually shot it. We had to block out the sun to make it work. And the final shot. Yeah. The entire shoot went for 2 days and was the easiest shoot I've ever been involved in, and I can only put it down to having so much prep done in pre and everything signed off before we started. Our editor Ben was able to cut the offline in less than a day, which is unheard of. And I'll share that with you now.
Get your game on. Yeah. Get your game on.
The agency sat in the screening with us and watched it once and went, yeah, great, approved. And I just went, sorry, what? And I had to force them to look at it twice, to be honest. Then Sam and Laura Heath, another awesome animator in Sydney, spent the next 2.5 to 3 weeks animating and rotoscoping everything to produce the final project.
Get your game on. Yeah. Get your game on.
There you Client was happy, agency happy, crew were happy, and that made me really happy. Yay. That was like immediately after the shoot where I just stopped, and it was, I think we wrapped an hour and a half early, and I went, this is going to work. This is going to work. But at the end of the day, the industry we work in moves so quickly and is easily disrupted by technology and social issues that it is almost impossible to stay on top of all areas on your own. So we need collective thinking if we are going to have longevity, if we're going to find solutions to communication problems along the way, if we're going to turn friction into something positive so that we can create new ideas, and be aware of our own impact so that we can work more consciously. Thank you.